Between the time when chaos broke Cadia and the return of the sons of the Emperor, there was a time undreamed of. And unto this, Cronan, destined to wear the jeweled crown of Aquilonia upon a troubled brow. It is I, his chronicler, who alone can tell thee of his saga. Let me tell you of the days of high adventure. With a heavy heart, Cronan the Destroyer, boss of the Nose-Splitter tribe, went to his most sacred of all spots, his Sanctum Sanctorum, his Axis Mundi. Atop a ridge, he looked down at the valley which he ruled with an iron fist. He was about to embark on a pathway he never thought he would tread, a dark walkway to folly. But he now had no choice, for he had to obey the great prophet. Cronan sat heavily and prepared himself. He was about to perform an activity that had spelt doom and destruction to countless empires, civilizations, and races since the dawn of time. He was about to think. He reached for his thinking grot and, after a small amount of structural rearrangement, he donned the headpiece that would ease his way into this dark domain. For Cronan had heard the prophet, not just listened. He had truly heard him. The days after the meeting of the big boss bash, where the prophet had spoken, stayed with him. It was a moment of epiphany for Cronan. He did not know if the legendary prophet was speaking the words of Gork or of Mork, or of both. But they had the ring of the gods about them. He had been told how the race of orcs had been very good at brutality, but had forgotten their heritage, had ignored half of their own lives, their own culture, their own religion. They had forgotten cunning. The prophet went on to remind them how the gods were of brutal cunning and cunning brutality, but then asked all that were there how often they had heard these words, or looked on in amazement, aghast at the revelation. They had all been brutal, but when was the last time they had been cunning? How the prophet now challenged them all, from highest to lowest, to not only do the brutal thing, as it was the right thing for all true orky orcs to do, but also to do the cunning thing, as all orky orcs should do. Divine words, a terrifying concept, to change their entire way of life, but it was as the gods had demanded. So Cronan researched the best ways to be cunning. He had often heard how smart the Humies were, so he studied them. His long and laborious hour of concentration brought him to an unimpeachable decision. Cunning resided in hats. All of the most clever Humies wore large hats, headgear worthy of cunning. Thus did Cronan choose his thinking grot well. Longer limbs for tying into position, and not a squealer, also for the tying into position. Prepared as he was in his thinking spot with his sinking grot, Cronan began to think. There was a regular patrol in force from the Humies. They would have metal boxes and marines. The boxes kept his boys away from the marines due to the phenomenal darker the boxes provided, but when closed upon, the marines in blue would stand in orderly lines and keep his boys away from the boxes. He required cunning to solve this issue. So he scrunched up his eyes and continued to think. Release the cunning within. Release the cunning within. Cronan sighed, reached up, and took down his thinking grot. It was trying too hard, and the whispering was distracting, so Cronan bit the arm off the grot and slowly munched. The relaxing chewing did seem to be improving matters, also the struggling and writhing from his previous headgear. But the high-pitched screaming was not conducive to the process, so Kronan finished the job by crushing its head. The grot went still as its skull shattered beneath his grip. Between the slow hypnotic dangling of the grot from his fist, the relaxation of the chewing, and the obvious benefit of the location, Kronan began to see the way forward. He truly felt blessed by Gork and Mork. The prophet was very good at his job, it would seem. He and his boys would be ready for the next patrol. The tank column trundled down the valley as it always did. Kronan, with his newfound God-given abilities, considered that they might just be looking for a scrap to kill boys. No idea why, but it did not matter now. He would have those boxes very soon, and with them he would then take the nearest Hume cities. They always opened the door to Hume boxes. Kronan smirked. As they reached the middle point of the valley, he raised his weapon high and signaled the attack. Orcs thundered down the valley towards the Marines and were quickly amongst them, for the fire from their boxes was not coming. Lines of a strange energy flashed between points in the forest and the tanks, seeming to pass straight through the metal exterior and go somehow inside. As the Marines had no supporting fire, their demise was swift, their orderly lines crushed under the tide of green. Kronan walked to the vehicles. As he got closer, he saw that they were shaking and juddering, like there was something happening inside of a hectic nature. Suppressed gunfire could be heard from within on occasion, but this was becoming less and less as the lines of power kept striking them. Kronan walked to the hatches and could see that some form of fluid was running between some of the nuts and bolts. The hatches not quite snug enough. The fluid was an acrid fecal brew and seeped out swiftly, but then it changed to become more solid and more green. Blood. Snot blood. The swaying in the vehicle seemed to slow and then stop. Kronan dropped his hand, and the lines of power ceased as one. Pulling hard on one of the hatches, Kronan saw it fly off, and an ocean of diminutive dead green bodies flooded out. But amongst them were some pink bodies, with lots of red smears. So many snots had been sent through that they had packed the vehicle and crushed all inside to death. It would take some time to clear away the snots, but that is what grots were for. Well, other than thinking, of course. It was a good day. Kronan felt he had been truly orky today. Not only had he been brutal, but he had also managed to be cunning. Kronan would soon have multiple Hume tanks looted and ready to go. Perhaps this cunning thing might just be worth it, after all. Welcome, gentle listener. I am Baldermort, and I wish to introduce you to the forces, factions, and war gear of the Warhammer 40k universe. Today, we are going to look at one of my most cherished memories, and one of the most iconic pieces of war gear in the entire grim darkness of the future. For I recall the first time my elder sibling fielded this unit. I remember the look in his eyes when he told me what it was and how it worked. And I have to admit I laughed so hard I nearly had an accident. So, let us now discuss one of the most ancient, most hilarious, and most heinous of all weapons of Warhammer, the Shokk attack gun. Ork war gear is not like that of other races, not one bit. Two things make it stand out, highlight the differences between this race and any other in the setting. 1. This weapon can only, and will only work in the hands of an orkoid or orc. And 2. This weapon is only one of the near unlimited templated vista of carnage within the very soul of the orc race. It has been seen 1,000,000 times across scores of millions of years. Always the same, always deadly, and quite frankly, always intensely messy. The Shokk attack gun is one of the templates of weapons that have been hard-lined in to the very genetic makeup of the orcs. It was placed there by their creators, the Old Ones, during the time of the War in Heaven. If you are new to the orcs, then please do see my entry on the secret history of the orcs and Krork. It will be enlightening, but let us crack on. When orcs reach a certain level of population, their race spontaneously throws up savants of differing specializations, one of them being mech boys. Mech boys are like natural geniuses in regard to technology, but they will almost universally throw up technology from their own breeding, their own racial memory. Thus would the Shokk attack gun forever be a feature in Ork armies until there are no Orks left. Secondly, the Shokk attack gun is an utter bane for any standard race. An utter bane. It works on war energy, the power field generated by Orks. Thus it cannot ever truly be replicated or understood, as the war energy of the Orks makes their war gear literally break the laws of physics, if enough Orks are present and they believe it can happen. Due to the war field, if enough Orks believe something can happen, then happen it does. Thus the Shokk attack gun cannot be defended against or countered, as it does not adhere to the rules of the galaxy as other sentient races know them. Archimedes also asked that I make the statement, "This is also cause the other races are all stupid." There, that should keep him happy. But what does it actually do? What is this vile beam that comes from a Shokk attack gun? What is this lethal weapon that is actually the scourge of the galaxy and the worst nightmare of any tank officer stationed anywhere near a green-skinned threat? Well, let's make this as simple as possible, shall we? What it does is create a field of energy that cuts through real space. It is akin to the much larger forms used by the Orks under the Beast, where they could create corridors in time and space large enough to transport their attack moons. The Shokk attack gun creates this field and it emulates a wormhole. Thus the tunnel of power has two ends, one near the Shokk attack gun and the other where its beam is aimed. And now for the truly horrifying and hilarious bit. The Shokk attack gunner will then work in tandem with a runt herd. The herd will then force hundreds or more of its smaller snotling cousins into the tunnel. Yes, the ammunition for this weapon is snotlings, the tiniest of the Orkoid races. As they travel, they are subjected to the mind-smashing effects of the warp. In their fleeting seconds of transportation, the little beings have been subjected to horrors of the warp and come out the other end in a state of stark, staring madness, and with a rage on that could stop a space wolf in their tracks. Also, they are deranged and terrified beyond the ken of mortal men, so their little bodies dispose of literally everything they are carrying when they arrive. Amongst the tidal waves of snotlings that are transported is a veritable tsunami of bodily fluids, both vomit and excrement, that is a threat to any sanitary being as much as the wretches themselves. Now imagine that you are sitting in a tank. A hole in space appears in the middle of the cabin. You fight as fast and hard as you can against these tiny gremlins, slipping and sliding on their effluents. Alas, as you continue to fight, more and more of the horrors arrive through this hole in space. 3 options now remain for your fate. 1. You drown in feces and vomit and the blood of the snotlings. 2. Your face is torn off by one of the mad midgets. Or 3. You open the hatches and flee the situation, only to run into the Orks that are crashing through your infantry's lines, as your heavy firepower did not protect them. The Shokk attack gun only stops firing if it explodes, which is all too often. It runs out of snotlings to force down the corridor, or the Ork boss orders them to stop. So no armoured vehicle is safe. But it is worse than this, gentle listener, as the weapon just cuts through time and space. It is not limited to vehicles or buildings. It is not a rarity for a Terminator, Dreadnought or other walker to have their occupant torn to pieces by snotlings appearing inside the chassis or armour. I was once struck with the image of a snotling's front appearing out of the helm of a Terminator Marine, its rear end inside the protective armour. That Marine would have suffocated or drowned in the most ignoble way possible by snotling discharge. Ugh. As amusing as this all is, why has it been in my first wargear options? Well, it is simple. I feel that the Shokk attack gun, more than any other weapon or wargear, displays the other, most fundamentally important realm of Warhammer. You have all heard me extol the richness of its story and its amazing pedigree. but there is always that other pink elephant in the room. Humor. Warhammer is ridiculously over the top and utterly irreverent. It is this weapon, amongst all others, that enshrines and epitomizes that tongue-in-cheek jocularity that allows this hobby to be more than just a lament of a grim, dark future. More than just a hobby, but a love affair. Warhammer has, at its very core, a requirement to adore whimsy and a wish to truly enjoy oneself. Warhammer. It's all about the fun. And never let any old ghoul try to persuade you otherwise. I have been Baldermort, your faithful servant. I hope you have enjoyed my introduction to the Shokk attack gun. If so, then do please consider liking and subscribing. If you are a regular gentle listener and see the worth in what we are doing, then do please consider sharing the video or supporting us on Patreon or with a one-off donation. Yes, I do wish I had an Ork army. Maybe next year, if things go well with the channel, eh? Now, no matter what you do today, do try to make some time for fun. Toodaloo.